What's up guys, welcome back to another video. It's a beautiful Friday out here. So today we were meant to get S15 brought out to us for a tune, which ended up falling through. And Lachlan was also meant to get a lift out with me to pick up his 31, and that ended up falling through as well. So we've ended up with a pretty quiet day today. Well, not much really going on. So today is Friday. Wednesday we had a fairly quiet day as well. We did a big cleanup in the shed, so we just cleaned everything up. I didn't really show anyone, but massive cleanup. Rex spent yesterday still cleaning up, moved the table and cleared out everything nice, and you know, it's all nice and clean in here, which is awesome. So we got here today and still trying to figure out what to do. You know, because we've always got heaps of stuff on, we never don't have anything to do. It's just a matter of trying to determine what we do today, now that we don't have much going on. Well, work-wise anyway. So the Hilux here, that'll be coming in another video, but we're still waiting on some more parts for that. So it pretty much was down to the point where either I'll sort out the micro, pull the motor and start doing that, or we just start on the LS for the R31. So given that it is Friday afternoon and I don't plan on working tomorrow, I thought I don't want to start the micro just in case it runs over to a like 2-day sort of thing, because we've got to pull the motor out, do the timing set, do the clutch, get the motor back in with new drive shafts. It's a little bit there to do. I reckon we can knock it over in a day, but in the interest of it potentially going over a day, I'd rather just do it one day next week, so that if it runs over a day, I'm back here to finish it and it's not a pain in the ass and it's not in the way. So we've decided to get cracking on pulling down this LS1 for the LS31. So that's what we're going to do this morning, and then hopefully sometime during the day we can move on to this thing when parts get here. And we're meant to have another car coming out for just a run up on the dyno, but yeah, we'll see what happens there. We don't know. Peggy's car can go outside now. It was just in here because I didn't have to move it the other day. Cold start sorted on that. It's pretty good. So yeah, we'll get that out, start working on this LS. And I want to make a few videos while this LS is pulled down. But the main one for this video that you're watching right now is just for the interest of the R31 build thread and documentation. And yeah, pulling down this LS that came out of my Tiger Mica SSVT Series 2.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
Righto guys, getting this thing fairly pulled down. I didn't really say this at the start of this video, but we're not actually pulling the bottom end of this thing down, we're leaving the bottom end as is. Actually, once we get it pulled down, I'll take you through the complete plan of this engine. I'm pretty sure I have before, but just in case. But anyway, got it pulled down. Woo! It's a bit loosey-goosey on the old timing chain. Slap, slap, slap-a-roo. That would have been nice. Yeah, bit cooked. Anyway, routine maintenance, I suppose. This engine had 210,000 Ks on it-ish, I believe. Something around that. Apart from that, so far everything seems to be okay. Nothing obvious that's bad. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the engine when I pulled it from the car, so I wouldn't have expected to see much wrong with it, but it's always nice pulling down engines. It's the storytelling phase. It's quite nice, I enjoy it. Engine pull, teardown's probably my favourite part. Quite enjoy it. It's good, it's good. Righto guys, so we've got the cam out, and at this point this is about as far pulled down as this engine is going to get. We've still got to pull the rear plate off, but you know, it's a pain on the engine stand. I think Rex is going to look at doing that now. But this is pretty much it. So cam out, bottom end still assembled. This is about as pulled down as it's going to get. So the actual cam bearings in this motor are not actually as bad as a lot of stock ones that I have seen, which is pretty good. And yeah, we don't really have any reason to pull this bottom end down. There was no issues with it when it was in the SS that I pulled it out of. So it's just another one of those things where it's a cost we're trying to cut out and trying to budget for not having to do that, which is why we're sort of getting out of it fairly cheap. Although admittedly, the build for this engine is somewhat got out of hand, but we've still done pretty well in that we bought that other broken engine off our mate Dan and managed to get a lot of good parts out of that quite cheap. So it's still worked out a fairly budget operation, fairly budget setup, using a lot of the parts we already had laying around and a lot of the parts from that engine we pulled down from Dan. So for 400 wheel horsepower, we're still looking pretty good as far as the budget goes. So anyway, while it's out here on the tray, we're going to scrape all the gasket surfaces we have to scrape. It's going to make a big mess, and then we'll get it in the engine room ready to sort of look at potentially getting the rest of our gear in it. I suppose there's literally no reason we can't actually just build it. Still got a lot of work to do their heads though, that's the big thing. We've got a lot of cleanup to do still on some parts, but at least we don't have to clean up any pistons and rods and stuff, so that's good. Righto guys, so while Rex works on getting this backing plate off this motor, I thought I'd give you a bit of a rundown on the engine because although I have given you a rundown, I believe, before, can't remember how long it was ago. This motor's been around for a while. It was meant to go into the Cressida, so I know I did a rundown for the Cressida series, but obviously a lot of you who are watching this probably never saw that. That was quite a while ago. So this is a VT Series 2 SS motor. So I had a Tiger Mica VT Series 2 SS. Quite a nice car, LS1 obviously, 6-speed manual. I did daily it for a little while. I got it real cheap off a mate of mine who I was working with. I sort of did him a solid and lent him some money at one point, and he did, although he paid it all back, I think he felt like he still owed me a favour or whatever, but he sold me the whole car for $2,000, like running, driving car. But I actually then regoed and dailied for a little while. Dad even dailied it for a little while as well. So that was always there. When I bought the Falcon and took the SS off the road, I pulled this motor out of it. It was all earmarked to go into the Cressida for the Cressida project, which as you guys know, is no longer sort of going ahead, and I'm decided to use this running gear for the R31 to get a car back to the track ASAP. That's not going to cost us a whole heap of money. So when I pulled this motor out of the VT had just knocking on the door of 210,000 Ks on it. So to our knowledge, this motor's never been apart. To our knowledge, it's completely stock. And all it had on it was like a set of pacemaker extractors and a K&N stock intake, whatever it was. Still all MAF tuned and everything, as far as we know, everything was sweet. Didn't have any problems in the car. The biggest problem I had with the car was the gearbox was very sad. So when I did pull the motor and box out, I actually rebuilt that gearbox. So we are using that gearbox in the R31. So it's my rebuilt gearbox. If you wish to, you can actually go back and watch those videos where I rebuilt that gearbox ready for the Cressida. So it and this motor are going into the R31. So obviously with this project with the R31, we wanted to keep things nice and simple and reliable, and we still wanted to get a nice sort of good solid bit of power out of them. As a lot of you guys know, we're big fans of LSs. We're big aspirated V8 boys. It's where Rex's roots really are. Rex has built a lot of real tough aspirated motors. So it's pretty much our jam. So being that we are, you know, now have the business running and aspirated V8s are sort of our thing, we were like, we can't just sort of leave it stock. We gotta tickle it up a little bit. So we decided to go full cam and valve train package in this motor. And so it's going to be cam, new timing set, Trunnion upgrade because we're going to be revving the motor, lifters and push rods. We don't normally do push rods in our LS packages because we find the stock ones to be fine. Unless you sort of float a valve out real far, it's pretty hard to actually bend a stock push rod. But given the fact that we pulled the lifters that we're going to be using out of that other motor that came broken to us, we don't know what brand the lifters that came out of it are, but they're obviously shorter and they have a longer push rod. So it came with Trend 80 thou push rods, which obviously if we're using those lifters, we have to use the push rods. So we are using push rods in this particular engine, although it's not something we normally do. So as you can imagine, we're using the lifters and push rods that we actually pulled out of that motor that we got off Dan, which we got cheap. So that saved us a bit of cost from having to buy new Johnson or LS7 lifters. And then we're using our own cam choice and a Trunnion upgrade because we're going to be revving it, and just a new timing set. So that is going to be essentially, well, obviously some valve springs too. For this instance, we're going to probably just use a set of good single valve springs because that's all we've really got in stock here, and we don't want to fork out the money to buy decent ones. However, whenever we do LS packages for customers, we always use double valve springs. Now they present a very big advantage in that if you break an outer or an inner spring, you still have some valve spring left, which is going to keep your valve out of your combustion area and stop it from kissing a piston. Whereas if a single valve spring goes, it's game over. So it doesn't matter how good your single valve spring is, quality and seat pressure. The fact is, if your single valve spring breaks, it's goodbye. That's game over. So as we saw with that motor we got from Dan, although we didn't actually film any of that because I was off work having my baby. But anyway, so that's a quick rundown. So for this engine and this combo, we are planning on doing it in a couple of iterations. So we're going to use this engine, the fact that we're going to have to dyno tune it, obviously, anyway, once it's built. We're going to use it as a really good opportunity to do some back-to-back tests on some different intake manifolds for our data. Well, we already sort of know what to expect, but we figured it would be really good content for the channel to have the data collated and back-to-back dyno tests for certain things. Those things include different intake manifolds, mostly. So we've got, obviously, a lot of our stock. We've got a couple of LS6 intake manifolds lying around. And being that this is an early VT LS1, it's got the old style LS1 intake manifold. So generally we know that the LS6 manifolds are worth around sort of 10 to 15 wheel horsepower. They flow a lot nicer, but given that we're going to be building this motor, it's a really good opportunity for us to do a back-to-back test. So we've also got a fast 98mm throttle body intake manifolds for an LS as well. We're going to do a back-to-back test with that as well. But essentially this motor will end up with an LS6 intake manifold on it. That's how the combo is going to be finalised. So outside of just our cam and valve train package, we also have a very good relationship with a guy who is very, very knowledgeable in LS heads, or pretty much heads in general, V8 heads. Rex has known him for a long time. He's been using him for a lot of his aspirated V8s for a very long time. And we've been talking a lot to him about what he's got as far as his sort of CNC programs and porting programs for these LS heads. So the second iteration of this motor, we are actually going to send another set of heads to him and have him do what he does. It's going to be another thing that we can offer to our customers that are doing LS packages, to have the heads done by him. We're keeping his contacts pretty close. We're not sort of letting them out. He's a very busy bloke, and his heads, we figure, should pick up quite a few horsepower. So it'll be another really good opportunity for us to showcase the difference in just having the cam and valve tray package versus having the heads as well. So yeah, pretty much we're going to run it at the moment just with the cam and valve train package, do a little experiment with the intake manifolds, and then pretty much run it and then enjoy the car for a little while, because at the moment we don't have the money to outlay to get him to do a set of our heads right now, being that we just sort of got the business up and running and everything. But a little bit further on down the track, we're going to send one of our spare set of heads to him to get them completely done. Once we get them back, we'll swap all of our gear into our new heads, put them back on, and then we'll have, again, back-to-back information of just what his heads can achieve, which we're expecting quite a few horsepower. So once that's all done, I'm then looking at maybe down the road going to E85 with the car, and by then, by our calculations, it should be making sort of 450 plus at the wheels, aspirated on E85. So that's a monstrous amount of power for a little R31. I can tell you that right now. You know, I'm used to driving them with sort of 250 to 300 horsepower. To have 450 wheel horsepower on tap on E85 with a nice torquey sort of LS1 is going to be absolutely ludicrous. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be wild. And that's pretty much the rundown of what the plan is for this engine combo in this car and what our plans to do with it are. Alright, sorry guys, there was one more thing I did have to mention. So on the shelf in our stock, we've actually got another set of CNC ported 243 LS heads. They're done by a very reputable head company, which I won't name, but it is another really good opportunity for us to do some back-to-back testing with the heads from our head guy and those sort of big name CNC ported heads as well. Just to have sort of data on how they compare. So again, we're going to have back-to-back runs of stock heads versus those CNC heads versus our guys' CNC heads, back-to-back where everything else on the combo otherwise stays the same, which gives us a really good benchmark of what we're working with. So, you know, we've got 3 sets of heads to try, plus 3 different intakes to try just to collate some data. But like I said, eventually this motor will end up in its final sort of form in that shell. Will end up with our guys' CNC ported heads on E85 and should be close to 450 wheel, which will be a great amount of fun. Righto guys, so we now have the short block in the engine room. It's pretty much more or less cleaned up as it's going to get, and it's just about ready to start being reassembled with our new parts. So I'm going to go through what parts we're going to be using. I was going to go through exactly why we go to the effort of upgrading all this stuff, but I figure it's probably not for this video. It's probably best suited for me to actually make another video particularly about LS motors. So I'm probably going to do that, so keep an eye out for that if you are wondering why, but I figure I could stand there and talk about them all day, so I may as well do that in another video rather than this one about this particular engine build. So, LS1 here, we've got a Crow cam. Pretty much most of the cams we use are from Crow, most of our grinds that we use. We have specific favorite grinds that we use for certain applications. The grind we've gone for this motor is a little bit more aggressive than we would normally choose for, like say, a customer street motor. But that being said, it's obviously a drift engine, so that's why we chose just a little bit more aggressive. But a really good mid-range cam, which is what I wanted for drifting, but it's going to be fairly grumpy, this thing. But not ridiculous, like not so large that it doesn't make any vacuum sort of thing. But yeah, it's going to be a fairly cranky cam. So we've got here, these are our push rods, these are our lifters that we pulled out of that motor that we got from Dan, which had a drop the valve. Now we have not confirmed exactly what these are, but they're definitely not stock LS1 lifters. So not 100% sure on what exactly they are, but we are going to go with them because they're going to be probably better than stock. Again, because it's one of our motors. That's the problem with these lifters, is because we can't identify them. We wouldn't feel comfortable putting them in anyone else's motor, but given that it's our motor for our drift car, it's a perfect opportunity for us to use them up, and hopefully it works out well for us and they work out. So these are our Trend 80th push rods that came off out of the same motor with them same lifters. So obviously these are to suit those lifters for their lengths. So that's the set of push rods that are going in it. Here's a set of rockers that Rex has already fitted the Trunnion Upgrade to. So you can see here the Trunnion Upgrade replaces the needle roller Trunnion in these LS lifters, which they do have a tendency to walk apart and walk out of the bearing race, at which point it'll send needle rollers through your whole engine, just much like a lifter would, which is a very, very bad time. So that's definitely something you want to be avoiding at all costs. For this particular application, we are just reusing stock timing gears because we may as well, for us, again, it's our motor, so that's why we're getting away with reusing a lot of this cheap stuff. So we're going to go stock timing gears, but with obviously a new timing chain. As you saw, that one was very sad. So new timing chain, stock timing gears, going to reuse the same oil pump, just going to have a stock oil pump on it. I've chosen to go away from the high volume pumps, especially being that this motor is aspirated for one, so it doesn't particularly need the extra oil feed. But it is also going to be a drift motor, which means it's going to be a very high revving motor, high RPM, which means more oil flow. So the problem with that is most stock oiling systems and sumps weren't built around big RPM for long periods, and you have issues like you see in RBs where you can potentially drain the sump for oil and pump all the oil in throughout the engine because of your RPM, in which case it starves the motor for oil and usually starves the bottom end first, which is goodbye bearings. So given that we're using a stock sump, it's not a huge capacity sump, I don't want to be pumping more oil than it has to, so stock oil pump's going to be fine. And that's pretty much it. Apart from that, just new seals, new gaskets for the front and rear plates, new gasket for the sump, new front and rear main seal, reusing stock head bolts, being that it's aspirated, doesn't particularly need upgraded head bolts. As far as we're aware, this motor's never been pulled down before, which means that those first head bolts have only been torqued down once, as far as we know, which means they should be right to reuse. Again, not something we do for a customer's motor, but again, it's our motor, so we're going to go with reusing a lot of this stuff just to see how we go. Because at the end of the day, if it goes wrong, we're the ones that foot the bill. So it's not like we're building someone else's motor and reusing the stuff. So that's about all I can think of. We're thinking about going to an underdrive harmonic balancer, again, because of that RPM issue. So your underdrive balancer, not only does it pick us up a few horsepower, but it also slows down our power steering pump and water pump and that sort of thing. So at high RPM, they can start to cavitate and cause issues with those ancillaries. So, you know, an underdrive balancer can be a really good idea for this application of the motor. So given that it is a drift motor and it is a fairly low capacity sump or a stock sump, we've opted for an aeroflow sump baffle as well. So they are just an aeroflow trapdoor baffle that bolts into the stock sump around the pickup. And this is the unit here. And all it does is eliminate your oil sloshing and surging, which potentially stops oil feed problems. So you can see there, it's a little trapdoor sump additive little unit that just bolts into the stock sump. And it's just trapdoor to make sure you keep that oil up at the pickup and make sure it doesn't starve for oil. So just a few little parts to throw in that just help for a drift application as far as your oiling and everything goes. But yeah, apart from that, this motor, apart from the heads, we still have to clean up the heads and do the valves and stuff. We're just going to give them a lap. Hopefully they don't need a grind. And yeah, we'll sort them out anyway. We'll make sure if the valves need a grind, we'll do a grind. But apart from that, this motor's pretty much ready to start going back together. Alright, so the grind we actually chose from Crow is the 1250 grind.
236, 242.
So 236, 242 at 610 on a 113. So that's pretty grumpy. This cam's quite a bit grumpier than what we would normally choose for a customer's street LS1 application, unless they really wanted something real grumpy. So it is going to be a pretty angry little motor. So we're expecting, even with the stock head setup, with the LS6 intake, we're expecting it to go over 400 wheel. With the LS1 intake, we're expecting sort of knocking on 400. So we're sort of expecting that 390-ish, 380, 390 on the stock intake, and then with the LS6, we're expecting 400 plus. And then yeah, we're expecting by the time we have our CNC heads and everything on it with the LS6 or this fast intake, we're going to do back-to-back testing. However, like I said, that's not my intake, that's Rex's, so it's not staying on the car, but we're going to use it for testing purposes. But by the time this is done with the LS6 intake on it, with those heads on E85, I would expect this motor to go 450 plus the wheels. Righto guys, we've got our heads here all disassembled and cleaned up. Cleaned up quite nice actually. Quite nice looking heads. I reckon we're going to have to grind the exhaust valve seats in these things. They are getting pretty old. They've done a fair few Ks. So. The intake valves and seats all look great. It's just the exhaust, because the exhaust is what gets covered up, like covered in carbon and crap like that. So. Whereas your intake valves are always getting cleaned by fuel going in, which is one of the advantages of port injection. I reckon the exhaust are going to need some grinding. Still to clean up our covers. While I've been doing these heads, Rex has been cleaning up everything else. Things like the oil pump, he's doing the sump at the moment. Yeah, cleaning up all that, the front engine cover, which we'll chuck a new seal in and reuse. And he's been putting them in here as he goes. So, we are making steady progress. We did debate on whether to do this cleanup stage at the moment, or to actually get the cam and lifters and stuff in the block, but decided to go ahead with the cleanup stage just because it's the worst part. Once everything's clean and everything's ready to go, your assembly process is just much nicer and smoother. So decided to persist with the terrible job of cleaning everything this afternoon, and then we can start assembling maybe another day and actually just do it all in one hit. But it is what it is. Again, because it's our own motor, we're not being super vigilant with cleaning. We're just cleaning it to the point where it's nice to work with and easy to work with and not going to cause any problems. Whereas with the customer's engines, it takes a lot more time to properly clean an engine that you're building for someone else. It's a very tedious and annoying job. So anyway, pretty happy with how those heads cleaned up well though. It's good. Righto guys, a pretty big day of cleanup and getting these valves and stuff ready. We lost a bit of time. We had a mate drop over with a Land Cruiser that we ran up on the dyno and just had a look at the chip he's got in it for him and stuff like that. So we lost a little bit of time, but still got most of it done. I've lapped this head, all these valves have been cleaned, ground, lapped, seats ground and lapped. This head is ready to go, just needs lapping, but run out of time today, so I'll do that next week. But after that, these heads are then ready to be assembled. We've just got to dig out some springs that we got for them, and then they can go together, and then we are at that point ready to start reassembling this motor with our cam and everything in it. So that's going to be next week's video. Look forward to that. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the footage. I tried to get some really good angles of what we actually do as far as our valve work and everything goes, just to make a nice aesthetically and entertaining video for you guys about what's actually going on. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. See you next week on the next one. Tune in then, smash like, smash subscribe. Peace out, see you, bye.